talk about one of the key verses Muslims use in their denial that Jesus died on the cross. We already know that they ignore an absolute plethora of historical evidence that supports the Bible's claim, but they also try to kind of turn the Bible against itself. And probably the key verse that they like to use, the backbone verse we'll say, is Matthew 12:40, where Jesus is talking to the Pharisees and they're demanding a sign. And Jesus says, the only sign I'm going to give you is the sign of Jonah, who was just like he was in the belly of the fish for 3 days and 3 nights, so I will be in the belly of the earth for 3 days and 3 nights. And their approach with this scripture is they'll say, well, looking back, was Jonah, when he was thrown overboard into the raging sea by the sailors, was he dead or alive? And the Christian or whoever will look back and say, well, if I remember the story right, he was alive. And they'll say, that's right, he was alive. And they'll say, when he was swallowed by the great fish, was he dead or alive? And then those who remember the story will say, well, he was alive. And then they'll say, well, when he was spit out on the sea, on the shore of Nineveh, was he dead or alive? And the person will say, well, he was alive. And they'll say, that's right. That is the sign, or that is the miracle of Jonah. Just as Jonah survived all that, Jesus also is a sign of Jonah. He will survive and did survive all that took place in his life, and he never died, just like Jonah did not die in the fish. Well, I think they use this text so much, I think it's worth our time to kind of break it down and look at what exactly does Jonah say, and how does this relate to Matthew 12? Well, if we look at Jonah 2:2, it reads, in my distress I called to the Lord, and he answered me. From deep in the realm of the dead I called for help, and you listened to my cry. Jonah 2:2. So here's Jonah saying, from deep in the realm of the dead. So is Jonah speaking an analogy here, or is he speaking literally? Well, if he's speaking an analogy, it was kind of like he feels like he was as good as dead, but he wasn't actually dead. But if he's speaking literally, to be deep in the realm of the dead means you're dead. That's what it means. So if he's literally speaking, he was having a death experience with God, talked to him while he was dead, and then God raised him up, pulled him back from deep in the realm of the dead. But if he's just speaking an analogy, it was like he was dead, but he wasn't actually dead. The Bible doesn't say he was like deep into the realm of the dead, so it kind of flirts with he could have been dead, but at the same time, we don't know. Jonah 2:6 kind of confirms this. To the roots of the mountain I sank down. The earth beneath barred me in forever. But you, Lord my God, brought my life up from the pit, almost describing a resurrection type of deal, like God resurrected Jonah in that moment. Again, we can't tell, is he speaking an analogy or is he speaking literally? But either way, I think if we look at what Jesus is saying here, Jesus saying, if you speak an analogy, hey, just like Jonah was resurrected, so will I be resurrected. Or if he's speaking literally, if Jesus and Jonah are both speaking literally here, just as Jonah was dead for 3 days, so I will be dead for 3 days. And just as Jonah was resurrected, I will be resurrected. That's the sign of Jonah, the resurrection, when he's as good as dead or when he's dead. That is the absolute sign of Jonah. That's the miracle we're seeing take place. It's absolutely not a backbone support to deny the crucifixion. I believe the reason the Muslims use this text so passionately is because there's really no other material they can use in denying the crucifixion. The crucifixion is the most proven event of basically all ancient history. Even the enemies of Christianity say one thing we know about Jesus is that he died on a cross. And Muslims don't want to believe it just because the Quran says it didn't happen. But everybody else, every other historian in the world says, yes, Jesus died on the cross. But my question for Muslims here is, if you put so much weight on Matthew 12 and say, yes, Jesus spoke these things, Jesus spoke about the sign of Jonah, why do you not put weight in the rest of Matthew? Matthew 27, verse 50 says, "And when Jesus cried out again in a loud voice, he gave up his spirit." In other words, Jesus died. Or Matthew 28:6, Jesus was crucified. He is not here. He has risen just as he said.